Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for May 27th through June 2nd, 2024. So if you are watching today live, as always, do say hello. It's always fun to see where everybody is watching from, even if you're not watching live. I know that some of you watch, you're part of my Tuesday club, you watch on Tuesdays, you watch on Spotify, you watch on YouTube. But that said, very lovely to see you all this evening, and always there's familiar faces as usual. And, we are about to go into June. So here we are, like May is almost done. How did that happen? And one of the things that I've been talking about, I think I even spoke about it last week, is that the second half of the year is a bit different, at least energetically, thematically, like the weather-wise, than the first half of the year. And the first half of the year, like we had the planet sort of in a certain area, but then with Jupiter now in Gemini, and even in September, I realize it's not September yet, but we're going to have our first eclipse in Pisces. See, the narrative is starting to move towards the mutable signs. And maybe you're like, I have no clue what the mutable signs are, but these are my Geminis, my my Virgos, and with my Pisces and my Sagittariuses. So that's where a lot of the action is starting to shift in the second half of this year. And even if you're saying, but how is this relevant to me? I'm not one of those signs, but don't forget, you are all 12 signs, and those signs actually may play important roles in your personal astrology. That's why it's always good to know your own astrology. And when we do go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, we'll just refresh ourselves, like, where's Gemini for me? And even if I'm not a Gemini, it might be a career sign. It might be a relationship sign. It might be about health and wellness, and where some of the narrative is starting to shift in the second half of 2024. So as I said a few moments ago, Jupiter is now in Gemini. That's as of a couple days ago. It was the 25th, Saturday, when Jupiter went to Gemini. It had not been in Gemini since 2012 and 2013. So I don't think it's enough to think back and be like, oh, okay, well, 2012, this happened to me. 2013, this happened to me. It's going to be the same. No. The astrology of about 2009, especially 10 and 11, 12 and 13, was very particular. It went all the way, I would say, into 2015. That's a little bit of a bigger conversation for another time, but we had some pretty heavy-duty aspects with Pluto and Uranus, Pluto and Capricorn, Uranus in Aries at the time. That was maybe not fun for some of my cardinal signs that are listening. My cardinal signs are my Aries, my Cancers, my Libras, my Capricorns. But like I said, it's another conversation for another time. So before I get too far, for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman, and I'm an astrologer and psychic medium located here in the New York City area. And every week we gather live to talk about the astrology, and you hear me say every week, the astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. We don't always think about astrology like that, but astrology is time. It's the energy of time, and it's the symbolic energy of time. And no matter where you are on planet Earth, whatever your background is, whatever your nation, we live that astrology the same, but it goes through these personal filters. This is why we need to sort of work with the astrology to help it to reveal something and to see ourselves as part of the greater whole. But anyway, let's go back. We have presently 3 planets in Gemini. And we've actually been seeing this. Maybe not you, because I have an app, and and somebody asked me recently, well, what app do you use? And I use Time Passages. I have a Mac, so I use Time Passages as one of the softwares that are available for Mac. I also use Astro.com, like every fancy astrology out there. No, I'm Astro.com. I actually really love Astro.com, and I've been using their chart calculation online software since I think like the late 90s. Early 2000s. So yeah, they've been a constant support and guide on my journey. But that said, what I've seen is that a lot of the sky has been bunched up in kind of a narrow band of signs. We had a lot of planets at one point earlier this year in Pisces, and then it's sort of like the slow train has moved. It moved to Aries. At one point we had a bunch of planets in Pisces and Aries, and then now, even up until last week, we had a lot of planets in Taurus. I think at one point it was 5. That's a lot of planets in one sign of the zodiac. And what it does is that it concentrates the narrative in pretty much one area or two areas. And this is something through something called rulerships. That's another conversation for another time. But right now, with the planet starting to go into Gemini, we're starting to see some movement. Gemini is what's called the third sign of the zodiac. It is an air sign. It is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet that, air quotes, governs it. It's the boss. Another way of looking at rulership. It is the boss of Gemini. So wherever Mercury is in the sky, it is pulling the energy of Gemini, and by extension, any planet in Gemini towards another part of the sky. Well, where's Mercury right now? Mercury is in Taurus. It's kind of catching up. And you remember it had the retrograde, so it was 2 months. I think from March and April and into May, it was 2 months in Aries. So now that the sun's in Gemini, where's the boss of the sun right now? It's over in Taurus, where we find Mercury. So Mercury by Monday will go into Gemini, and then we'll have 4 planets in Gemini, so more movement. But right now, again, Mercury's in Taurus. So we've got this energy of forward movement, ideas, information. Gemini is the sign of curiosity, trying new things, getting new perspectives. But we still have one foot in Taurus. And Taurus is a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more cautious. It wants to feel safe. It wants to make sure that it has everything that it needs. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different vibe. So it's like we want to move forward. We want to make choices, but we need to make sure that they're the right choices, that they're pragmatic choices, and that maybe they're even choices that set us up well for the future. This week, we got a little bit of a wild card, because Mercury, it's going to make what's called the conjunction to Uranus, just like Venus and the Sun did. I think it was a week or a couple weeks ago. So Mercury, voice, communication, how we think and listen and learn. It is ideas, information. It is our ability to look at two sides of things, to be flexible. It's our ability to also discern. It's also the ruler, the boss of Virgo. So Mercury meeting up with Uranus could mean a couple of things. It means that we get this energy of Uranus present with us this week. Uranus, what's Uranus? It's a very different planet than Mercury. Mercury is one of what's called the classical planets, meaning it was visible to the ancients. The ancients knew about Mercury. We can see Mercury in the sky. And then Mercury also is what's called a personal planet. It deals a lot with our day-to-day lives. It's very accessible. It moves very quickly. But then Uranus, it's a newer, air quotes, newer. Planet was discovered in, I think it was 1781. Newer. But the ancients did not know about the planet Uranus. It was not discovered until the 18th century through a telescope. So these are planets that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto that open us up to a world that we I think from a larger esoteric or archetypical level is not visible. These are also planets that talk about an evolutionary process. And Uranus in Taurus, it's been in Taurus since 2018, 2019, is trying to get us to grow and evolve how we think about security, stability, our feet on the ground, money, income, resource, food. These are all Taurus themes. Taurus is a very security conscious mind. It has this beautiful need to just make sure that we have enough, however you define that. That's what Taurus's job as an energy, maybe a little bit different than a sun sign. Its job is as an energy. So we've had a lot of focus in that sign, mostly in the background over the last 5-6 years. But that said, with Uranus and Taurus, we've had all these planets, go one by one through Taurus, and so they've met up with the energies of Uranus. And Uranus wants us to think about things differently when it meets up with Mercury, to maybe consider a perspective that we would never have considered. Sometimes we get stuck. We can get stuck in our own way. We can get stuck in our ideas. Sometimes we choose the pragmatic and safe choice. And maybe on paper that absolutely makes sense to choose the pragmatic and safe choice. But sometimes that, again, gets us stuck. Maybe Mercury to Uranus this week is a vision of a different way of thinking, speaking, moving. It can enlighten, it can give us the light bulb, metaphorically speaking, but it's a little bit of a wild card. So that energy is going to be with us this week. And, like I said, we've got some movement now that we've got a few planets in Gemini, and it may mean that, we're trying to sort of strategize and be pragmatic at the same time. But here comes Uranus, and Uranus is like, actually, wild card, or maybe think about things a little bit differently. So that's something to keep our eye on. That's later this week. That's going to be on, I have it written down, May 31st. But anyway, so, now that, what is Jupiter? Now that Jupiter is in Gemini, and actually I really love Jupiter, and maybe I love all the planets, but Jupiter, it's a different type of planet than Mercury. Personal planet, moves fast. Jupiter takes almost 12 years to go through each of those zodiac signs. And it's different than Uranus. Uranus being this evolutionary planet, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. But Jupiter's job is to get us to make our world bigger. We could stay small. We could not learn about anything, not taste anything, not activate our senses, be really, narrow in how we experience life. And maybe we're happy with that. It's up to you. It's your choice. But Jupiter is always pushing us to grow our vision, to grow our vision of our lives, to try new things, to explore. For some people, that's getting on a plane. For some people, that's going and getting a degree or getting some sort of certification. For some people, it's just the pure pursuit of trying to find something. And Jupiter helps us to find meaning and purpose and to fill our lives with meaning and purpose. And it's a little bit different because sometimes Jupiter, it has this kind of, quote unquote, a Santa Claus reputation or good luck and fortune. And it's not to say that it can't be good luck and fortune. I think sometimes it is very fortunate to have grace for things to happen and for things to work out. And certainly we could use a little bit of grace right now. So we have Jupiter in Gemini, and Jupiter is trying to make Gemini's world bigger. And for each and every one of you, that sign plays a different role. Again, when we go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, we'll refresh ourselves. What does Gemini mean for you? So Jupiter's making Gemini's world bigger. It means we have more options, more choices, which I don't know, maybe there's a plus side and a negative side to that. But there's a multiplicity to Gemini that I love. It sort of revels in the fact that wherever you go on planet Earth, everything's different and yet everything's the same. There's different colors, there's different smells, there's different flavors, and that's sort of this natural multiplicity of life. That we take the fertility of Taurus and we put it into Gemini, the next sign, and then that fertility moves, it spreads, it creates life. So it's one of the ways in which we can look at Jupiter and Gemini over the next 12 months. Again, we can look back to 2012 and 2013. It really depends on, we have to be very focused on where Gemini is for us because there was other things that were happening at that time. But that's the thing, that Jupiter moves in these grand cycles, these 12-year cycles, and that Jupiter primarily will spend a year in each of the 12 zodiac signs, just trying to make our world a little bit bigger. Jupiter is our teachers, the people that inspire us, motivate us, and motivate us to look up, to look around. And as the ruler of Sagittarius, the boss of Sagittarius, Jupiter is the light of the stars. Sagittarius is a fire sign. We see fire in the sign of Aries. We see it in Leo, which is the sign of the sun, the sun that gives us life. But in Sagittarius, it's the fire of the stars. And then Jupiter is also the ruler of Pisces, which is the other side of the coin. It is both to look outward and to discover, but also to look inward. So all that energy and all these different ways in which we can look at Jupiter is really focusing its light, its experience on Gemini this year. If you are a writer, maybe you will be prolific. Maybe you will sing. Maybe you will dance. Jupiter loves to dance. Maybe you will travel more. Maybe you will explore more. And hopefully, if that's what you want, that's what's available to you. So Jupiter's now in Gemini. It's a little bit of a different energy than Taurus, because Jupiter trying to make Taurus' world bigger is like to really enjoy the physical plane. But Gemini is a mental sign, meaning it's more about ideas and information and exchange and socialization. And so it's going to be a different rhythm and vibe for the second half of 2024. And now that Jupiter's in Gemini, it will make something called a square to Saturn. Don't forget, Saturn's been in Pisces, mutable sign, since March of 2023. So Saturn lends a little bit of a different element to it. It says, okay, like revel in the multiplicity of life, try new things, but to make the choices that are in alignment with your heart, your soul, your spirit. Maybe sometimes we don't have that luxury. Maybe Saturn is to saying that we still need to try to endeavor for that. But that's why I think the second half of the year will be a little bit different than the first half of the year. We also have Jupiter making a trine to Pluto now that it's in now that Jupiter is in Gemini, Pluto is in Aquarius. So we got this air energy happening. Pluto is kind of an interesting element, because really Pluto hasn't not been in Aquarius in our lifetime. We'd have to go back 250 years, maybe roughly, since the last time Jupiter in Gemini made a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. And that's even if, well, I guess it would work out because it's a 20-year cycle. But anyway, so we can't use the past as a reference. But if Jupiter wants to make our world bigger, Pluto, it really depends. It wants to transform. It wants to reform. It wants to empower something. It wants to tear something down so that something new can come into its place. So it's a very powerful energy. Sometimes when people see Jupiter and Pluto, they're like, oh, wealth and power. And I don't know, maybe that's what you want. But in this case, it is happening in the air signs, and the air signs are more motivated by ideas and information and the exchange of ideas and information. Pluto is the systems. It's the systems of ideas. It's the systems, social systems. It's the systems that power our lives. And Gemini is, again, sort of the variety and the multiplicity of all the things that can run these systems. So a couple of different ways to look at it. But this is why I think that when we start to get into next week, when Mercury goes into Gemini, it's going to be a lot more movement further. We will also have a Gemini new moon next week. I believe it's the 6th of June, but we'll talk about that. Next week, no, that's not next week, it's the week after. We'll talk about that later. But what else? So we also have a little side note. We don't really have a lot of big aspects this week. It's mostly the moon doing a lot of the talking. The moon is spending the week from Capricorn. I think by now it's in Aquarius, and then it goes into, by the end of the week, into Aries. So it's really, that's where the moon is focusing its time, and that's for us, bringing us to the last quarter moon. And the last quarter moon is taking us through signs that really talk about, what's our role in the world? What are our duties and responsibilities and commitments? Where are we going? What's our future? Where are we headed? But that said, we will have Mars make a conjunction to Chiron this week. And that's our other big aspect. Mars, as you probably know by now, it's in Aries. It'll go into Taurus on June 9th, so in a couple of weeks from now, and it's finally meeting up with Chiron. This will be, I think, the third conjunction that Mars has made to Chiron while Chiron has been in Aries. The last one was June of 2022. A couple of quick points about Chiron. It's number one, a newer addition to astrology. So not a lot of people always know what Chiron is. It's oh gosh, what's it called? It's an asteroid. It's an asteroid, and I don't typically use a lot of like the newer stuff in my astrology, but for me, Chiron speaks to me because it talks about the need to heal something. And Chiron says that true healing only happens when we're able to step out of our personal suffering and sort of connect to a collective experience, and to take the things that have made us suffer the most and use it like medicine to help and inspire other people. And Chiron's symbol is the key. It's another reason why I like it. And it says that, when we're able to connect to a collective experience, when we're able to help people, Chiron then becomes a key and opens up our higher potential. For us, Chiron, again, has been in Aries for a few years by now. It actually went in 2018. If Chiron is a pain point or sort of talks about a suffering or something that needs to be healed, then we've been doing that work in a sign, Aries, that talks about courage and bravery, the need to move forward, the need to take action. And sometimes that's not always easy. If you were born 50 years ago, you have Chiron in Aries and you're having something called the Chiron return, and sometimes these deeper pain points can come to the surface. Even if you let's say you turned 50 in 2018 or 2019, 2020, 21, so forth, you would have had the Chiron return then. It's always around age 50. So if you're a cohort that's born between 1968 and 1977, you have this at birth. There's a deeper possible pain point that deals with having to find your courage and bravery. That may not be relevant for everybody, but collectively speaking it is. It's something that is in the air and the water, so to speak, this week. And to see, what is the deeper material that's coming up for you. Because sometimes when we feel something, it may actually not be ours, or it might be connected to something that's very old. And that's the other thing about Chiron, is that it really talks about these threads that run deep and run even deeply into the past, and perhaps even past lives, if you believe in that. So let's look at the astrology of each of the 12 zodiac signs of this week, starting with Aries. So this week, Aries, Mars, your planet, is starting to wrap up its time in Aries. Hey, you are in Aries. So you have Mars, your what's called your ruling planet, at home with you. It gives you a lot of inspiration and motivation. Maybe you have felt in the last few weeks a desire and drive to take action, to move forward. Every Aries is different, but typically Aries is a sign that needs a lot of physical activity. It needs movement. It can't sit still. And you had a lot of that the past few months. But how are you feeling? Just to reflect in your own time, how are you feeling Mars in Aries? Do you have more energy? Are you a little bit more argumentative? Are you a little bit more impatient? But this energy is with you into June 9th. So use it, as you need to start something new, to take action, to move forward. If you are feeling some emotionality this week, and maybe even some deeper pain points, it may be because that Mars and Chiron are together this week. Whatever you're feeling, to always try to take a step back and to observe it, not to detach from it per se, but just to why am I feeling this way? Why am I lashing out? Or why is this my first instinct? Because Chiron says there's a deeper thread that needs to be looked at. And maybe it's not something that you quite think it belongs to. It's oh, this person annoys me, but actually you realize that it's connected to something very old. That's kind of how Chiron works. And Chiron's just trying to help us to free ourselves from these old knots that pull us back into the past. There's that, but then there's also Jupiter and Gemini. And as I was saying in the introduction, even if you're not a Gemini, because you're an Aries, Gemini forms a part of your astrology. And so for you, Gemini is your sign of writing, speaking, communication. It's how you think and listen and learn. So this is you've stepped into a very busy time over the next 12 months, because now you've got Jupiter in this space, it is inherently very inquisitive. It wants you to take classes, write, speak, be on the go, travel. Maybe you've got trips planned, and to really see how this animates and energizes your life. There's a lot of planets in Gemini at the moment. Jupiter is joined by Venus and the Sun, and next week it'll be joined by Mercury and a new moon. So it's a busy time for you, and it will, at least next week, continue to be a busy time for you. Open up your mind, try new things, taste new things, smell new things. Again, plan a trip, see something new. That's kind of this energy of curiosity that's being very energized and activated in your astrology at the moment. Taurus. So Venus is your planet, and as you remember from last week, Venus is in Gemini. It is a flirtatious, social, place for your planet to be. It wants to try new things, wants to buy new things. That's the thing about being a Taurus. It is the sign of the material. That doesn't mean that's 100% the case for all my Tauruses. So this is a time for you to really focus on your material life. What do you have? What do you need? The gathering resources. Maybe it is spending money. Maybe it is buying something, but we don't always have to spend money or buy things, of course. And maybe it's just to be in the enjoyment of life and sort of in all the different options that we have available to us. Gemini is Taurus's second sign of money and income. So money, property, assets, resource, income will be a big focus over the next 12 months. Keep in mind, this is a little bit bigger conversation, but you've had Uranus, you've heard me talk about this, you've had Uranus in Taurus since 2018 and 2019. Believe it or not, we're actually starting to come to the end of that. And in 2025, Uranus makes its first arrival into Gemini. So I wanted to mention that because Jupiter in your sign of money and income might be planting seeds for Uranus when it gets there. How do we make more money? How do we invest differently? Maybe it's not physical, maybe it's value. Like, what do I truly value? What's in alignment with my values, for example? But this is probably a very busy time, or things are happening, even if it feels like nothing's happening. Just wait till Mercury gets into Gemini next week. We have a Gemini new moon, and things are going to really start to move and take off. Gemini, happy birthday, Gemini. You've got a lot of things going on in your sign. So you now have Jupiter in Gemini for the next 11, 12 months. So kind of think of it like this. You are at the beginning of a grand cycle. This cycle will take you over the next 12 years. I know, I can't even envision what the next 12 years will be like. But Jupiter on some level is giving you curiosity, confidence, motivation, inspiration. Jupiter typically thinks big. It has big ideas. It wants to make your world bigger. So not that you are playing small, of course not, Gemini, but you've got this big planet. It is literally the largest planet in our solar system. It's so big that it keeps the asteroids from coming towards the Earth. But you have this sort of outsized influence in your astrology at the moment. So what are you going to do with it? What are the seeds that you're planting? What are the adventures that you're going on? What are the new cycles that you're starting? And you also have Venus in Gemini, a very social place for Venus to be right now. So maybe it's a very social time for you as you celebrate your birthday season. You also will have Mercury starting next week. So things are starting to move and percolate. I think right now you got 1 foot in an old cycle with Mercury still in Taurus. But again, that will start to change next week. Cancer, the moon is your planet. And so the moon is actually doing a lot of the talking this week, and it's moving from Capricorn all the way to Aries this week. So for you, Cancer, Capricorn is your relationship sign, and then Aries is a career sign for you. So we're really looking at relationships this week, going into, the moon will be in Aquarius for the end of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And Aquarius for you is a time to really look within, to look at your deeper emotions, themes around trust, vulnerability, power, control. That'll start to change as we get into the latter part of this week. The moon goes into Pisces, much more of a time to explore and to plan trips and to see the world, to focus on education. And then you close out the week where the moon is really getting you to focus on career, your duties and responsibilities, your place in the world. So that said, what is Gemini for you? Well, as a Cancer, Gemini forms something called your 12th sign. If Cancer is the first sign, because you're a Cancer or you're a Cancer rising, if we count out and we get, I guess, 11, or 12, we get to Gemini. So Gemini is the sign that comes before Cancer. And when we get to the last sign, symbolically speaking, we've reached the end of the road. It's the time to reflect, to look back at the previous journey. And because Jupiter deals in great cycles, these 12-year cycles, this is the end of a 12-year journey, 12 years. And that the last time Jupiter was in this part was 2012 and 2013. Typically speaking, Jupiter is trying to make your inner world bigger, your spiritual world bigger, because when you go from the 11th to the 12th, you have moved from the world that you see and that you know into the world that you can't see and you can't mentally head know. You have to heart know it. So the next 12 months could be a time of exploration, meditation, retreats, trying to find answers, and the answers that typically do not come in a book, but they come from within. That area's got a lot of activity. The sun is there right now. This is all in advance of your birthday season, starting June 21st. Venus is there. Mercury will get into that space next week. You have a new moon there on the 9th. So there's just a lot of focus on your spirituality and your spiritual life, or at least your need to peel back the layers. The 12th is like when you're starting to fall asleep and you feel like you're moving into a new space, or even when you're starting to wake up and you're moving back into reality. That's kind of like the 12th. So however you want to do that in a way that's safe and healthy, to really peer into what is beyond this world and to really open up to who you are on a much bigger dimension. Leo, the sun is your planet, so it's hanging out in Gemini at the moment, and Gemini is your 11th sign. We got a lot of things going on in that part of your astrology. If I start with Leo and I count out, 11 signs, I reach Gemini. So the 11th is about friends, community, it's society, it's humanity. It's a bit big and abstract. Of course, we know our friendships, we can touch a friend, like we can't touch a friendship, but we touch a friend, not like that. But friendship is something that we know is part of life and society, humanity. We know it's part of life, and it's a bit abstract, but it's a big part of what unites and connects all of us. So the next 12 months are really about these bigger strokes in your life. Who are your friends? Who are your community? What groups are you involved in? What are your goals and your aspirations for the future? What is your vision for the future? Do you feel motivated and inspired to help people? Do you want to be a part of your community and help your community? Jupiter in this part of the chart can be a bit idealistic, can also open up your eyes and make literally the world bigger, not to travel and to have a vacation, but to make your world bigger in terms of the things that are happening on planet Earth. Maybe we all sort of see things differently, but Jupiter, in whatever way is relevant to you, is trying to make you more socially aware of issues and causes. Maybe you are volunteering, maybe you are trying to feel like you're involved in something that feels like you're giving back. A couple of different ways to look at it. Maybe you're just being more social. Over the next 12 months, you're spending more time with friends, and really, especially friendships that are really like people who are allies, for example. But that's a lot of where the activity is happening right now. You are coming to the end of your personal cycle, let's say the cycle that happens over the year. And when the sun gets into Cancer on June 21st, I realize we're not there yet, a little bit less than a month. That's when you start to wrap up your personal year, all in advance of your birthday season. Virgo, Mercury is your planet, and Mercury has been hanging out in Taurus. I know. It will, starting on Monday of next week, finally get into Gemini, so you're going to feel a little bit more movement. But Virgo, keep in mind that Gemini is what's called your 10th sign. So if I start with Virgo and I count out 10 signs, I reach Gemini. The 10th is your public reputation. It is the title after your name. It is your ambitions in the world, but it's also a place that's trying to get us to find our place in the world. We all need to grow up and become something. Of course, there's a lot of cultural overlay in that, but that's not really the point. It's that we need to grow and mature and to find ourselves in the world, whatever is relevant to us, of course. And so over the next 12 months, you've got Jupiter trying to make either your professional life bigger, or it's trying to make your sense of your place in the world. And I mean this more on a responsibility level. Maybe if we go over to the 11th sign, it's more about social issues and social causes. But if we go back to the 10th, it's like, what do you want to grow up and become? And Jupiter typically helps us to expand our influence, to maybe have some career opportunities, but also will inspire us to define our place in the world. Jupiter is the teacher, and sometimes when Jupiter goes to this space, we have an opportunity to teach, to share our wisdom and knowledge, maybe in a way that is relevant to our professional life. And this is a much bigger conversation. I'm kind of jumping ahead to 2025, I know. Next year, Uranus is going to get into your career sign, and it will make its first dip in 2025. It'll leave and come back in 2026. You're going to be starting a 6-7 year journey of reinventing your professional life. This is, of course, going to mean different things to different Virgos, but I wanted to mention that because with Jupiter there now, here in your 10th now, this might be a time when Jupiter is trying to open up your eyes and maybe give you the itch to do something else, to change careers, to bring in new ideas, new vantage points, that then Uranus makes the story different starting next year and beyond. But that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and Venus is in Gemini at the moment. It is joined by Jupiter and the Sun, and starting next week, it'll also have a new moon and Mercury. I'll put a V in that. Mercury and Gemini. What is Gemini for you? So if I start with Libra and I count out 9 signs, I reach Gemini. It is your sign that literally wants to make your world bigger. So classically speaking, Jupiter is accidentally dignified. So this is a season, meaning the next 12 months, for you to travel, explore, to open up your mind, to try on new ideas, to take classes, but maybe more like higher education or specialized training. It is to get philosophical. Like, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? What's my truth? What's my conviction? And so Jupiter is trying to make your world bigger. And typically when Jupiter is in this space, we make our world bigger by looking outside of ourselves. We will look towards a philosophy, a religion, a way of thinking, in order to give ourselves a sense of orientation and compass in the world. It doesn't have to necessarily be just those ways, but that's typically how Jupiter works. Maybe you have been working on a manuscript or working on a book, and so the next 12 months are about really sharing and releasing that into the world, because Jupiter is also giving you an opportunity to share, to speak, and even to teach. It really depends on Libra, but it is a time to get very philosophical, to not get too in the head, but to figure out, again, what do you believe in? What's your truth? What do you stand for? What's going to help you to orient yourself in life and in the world? Venus is there, Jupiter is there. Jupiter will be there for another year. Venus will move on, I think, in a couple of weeks. The Sun is there until the 21st of June. We will have a new moon in this space. So this is going to be a renewed focus starting with the new moon next week. Scorpio, Mars is your planet, and Mars is in Aries. It's got a couple more weeks left in Aries. So I think I said this last week, but Aries is a very go-getter kind of sign for Mars, your planet, to be. So it's taking your energy and it's pulling it over to your sixth sign. Because if I start with Scorpio and I count out 6, I reach Aries, which is where I find Mars, your planet, your boss. So this has also been about 4 weeks to focus on your health, your wellness, to get organized, to start a project, to get to work. It can be a little bit of a workaholic in this part of the sky, but that's not always true for every last person. This will start to change. I believe it's June 9th when Mars goes into Taurus. But so for now, we still have this focus on health and wellness and really sort of getting your life cleaned up and organized and focused on operations. That said, what is Gemini for you? Well, if I, again, start with Scorpio or Scorpio rising and I count out, I have to get to 8 signs until I reach Gemini. Hopefully this makes sense. So Scorpio, you are the 8th sign, and if I count out 8 signs, I reach Gemini. I like to say this from time to time because this gives us some deeper insight into Scorpio and a lot of the things that I think we see in pop astrology with Scorpio. Scorpio is a sign of duality. So is Gemini, but with Scorpio, it's a very different type of duality. It talks about the power of choice, Gemini, how our choice can impact Gemini, and also the inherent duality that exists inside of us, because we are both physical and non-physical. You're both light and we are dark, and both need to exist. And Scorpio in its bones knows this, but Scorpio can have a dark side. That's where the Gemini quality comes in, and Scorpio needs to really find the maturity to not always burn everything down, even though they feel completely justified. That's a Scorpio joke. I am a Scorpio. But that said, the next 12 months, you've got Jupiter there. So for some Scorpios, it's really about opening up to the duality of life. Maybe it's doing a lot of inner work, looking at your inner shadows. We all have inner shadows, whether it's through a psychological process or through a personal growth and exploration process. Jupiter gives you bravery, it gives you inspiration. It says, all right, let's go, let's do it. Jupiter's a little bit more like it's all going to work out. But also Jupiter can talk about money, assets, and finance. And it's a very classical way of looking at this part of the chart. And it could say that finance and spending and wealth and even debt might be a major focus over the next 12 months. Last time Jupiter was here was 2012 to 2013. A different time in the sky, but that's the last time you had Jupiter in your 8th. Sometimes when Jupiter is in the 8th, not always, but I've noticed that money, assets, and resources can come from unexpected places. You could have wealthy benefactors, you could have benefits, you could have things that open up to you. So hopefully that is the case for you. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on in Gemini at the moment. You will have a new moon there next week. Mercury will go into the 8th. Venus is there. Venus is a relationship planet. So it is starting to pick up on themes around trust, vulnerability, power, control, and even intimacy. And you may feel that June is really trying to dig into some deep material because Scorpio, you're always doing your deep work. Sagittarius, so big news. Jupiter is your planet and it's now in Gemini. Gemini is something called your 7th sign. So if I start with you, Sag or Sag rising, and I count out 7, I reach Gemini. So Gemini is right across the sky from you. It is your opposite sign. Opposite does not mean bad opposite. It's just you're part of a duality. You're part of duality with Gemini. If Sag is like the big vision of life, it's big ideas, it's travel, it's exploration, it's philosophy, it's truth, it's religion, it's law, but Gemini is like all the words and ideas that make that possible. So we both need each other. And Gemini is also saying, because Jupiter is your planet and it's now in Gemini, it's saying, okay, you have all these big ideas, you believe in X, Y, and Z, you think this is true, you've seen the world, but let's get back to the source material. Let's look at the individual words. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that the next 12 months are about other people, relationships, new people coming into your life, or you going out into the world and meeting new people. Movement, travel, exploration, that's always on the agenda with Sag and Gemini. And then there's the fact that this could be a time about education. Both Sag and Gemini are the signs of education. They just do it differently. For me, Gemini is the student, it's the classes, it's sort of the elementary plus the structure of education, and then Sag is higher education. It's just a different way of looking at it, but it's just saying that, education, writing, speaking, and communication are going to be a big focus over the next 12 months. A lot of planets are in Gemini. We've got Venus there right now, a bit of a social placement, a little flirtatious placement for Venus to be. Mercury will get into Gemini starting on June 3rd. So you're going to start to see a lot more movement in the relationship and other people department, especially starting next week. Got a new moon in Gemini on the 6th. So it's a time to plant your seeds for new relationships, new connections, revitalization of existing relationships. But keep in mind that there's a lot of the second, I know I said this in the introduction, the second half of the year is a bit different for you, because now that Jupiter has gone into Gemini, it's in a place, in a way, it's like changed seasons. And then it starts to play off of Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces, which is your sign of home and family, roots and foundation. So the second half of the year is about other people, other people's needs, other people's responsibilities and duties to other people. And this even includes starting a relationship, moving, starting a family, however that's relevant to you, Sag. But that's a lot where the focus is at the moment. And then we're going to start to have eclipses. We're going to have our first eclipse in Pisces on September 17th, and then get into 2025. We'll have eclipses in Virgo. So just a lot of activity in your chart. And then we have the planet Uranus going into Gemini in 2020. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So it's just a very intriguing time for Sagittarius. It's typically a sign that likes to sort of keep a lot of freedom, a lot of space. And it's not that stops being the case, but it just seems like you're going into a little bit of a different phase over the next few years, where it's not about losing freedom. It's just about, like, you don't forget about other people. Don't forget about making connections and making relationships and putting the work and putting the commitment into those relationships. Capricorn. So Saturn is your planet, and you hear me say it every week, it's still in Pisces. I know we got a couple more years, give or take, but it's always good to take a step back and reflect, how has the last 14 months been? Because Saturn has been in Pisces since 2023, March 7th, 2023. It is a time where it continues to be more about your intuitive voice, really feeling into your emotions, getting into these bigger questions about meaning and purpose, big existential questions, focusing on education, taking your words seriously, taking your choices seriously. That said, Capricorn, there's a lot of focus in Gemini at the moment, and Gemini is something called your sixth sign. So if I start with Capricorn or Capricorn rising and I count out 6, I reach Gemini. So the sun is there, Jupiter is now there, Venus is there. Venus is a career planet, and then Mercury will be there next week along with a Gemini new moon. There's a couple of ways in which we can look at the 6. So you've entered a month, or even the next 12 months, where you need to focus on work, projects, duties, responsibilities, things that you typically excel at. So no problem. It's about really looking at the structures and systems of your day-to-day life, making sure everything runs, maybe being flexible. And maybe that's the thing with Jupiter now in Gemini, Saturn in Pisces. There's a big focus on flexibility. And maybe that's because you have eclipses in both Aries and Libra. At least you did in March and April, and you will again in October, really turning the axis of your life. It's about career, it's about home. Maybe there's a move, maybe there's a change in your professional life. Maybe you're getting married, maybe you're starting a family. It really depends on the person. So that requires some flexibility. Maybe your day-to-day life is sort of changing, maybe it's expanding, maybe it's growing. Maybe you need to take this energy and focus on health and wellness, because sometimes when Jupiter's in this part of our chart, Jupiter wants to make our daily life bigger, to really focus on the rituals of our day-to-day life, and even the rituals that help us to stay grounded and healthy. So maybe you're getting into nutrition or something else that's related to that, maybe going to the gym, maybe just getting some fresh air, because there's a lot of movement that's happening in your day-to-day life. You can look back to 2012 and 13. That was the last time that Jupiter went through this part of your chart. Jupiter typically gives us the inspiration and motivation to make healthy and positive changes. So use that energy as you need, and especially around that new moon next week or 2 weeks on June 6th. Aquarius. So Saturn is your planet. It's still in Pisces. It'll be in Pisces until the beginning of 2026. So we got time. So this continues. It's my doggy. This continues to be a time that's really focused on money and income. I know you hear me say that every week, but what are you doing with it? Are you really looking at what you own? And maybe you're like, well, I don't need anything. Well, okay, fine. But we're human beings and we still need shelter. We need food. We need to feel like we have some sort of stability and security and resource in our life. So there's that. Maybe Saturn is saying to you, don't forget about these things that are really important. And Saturn typically is very black and white. It's something that's either working or it's not working. If money, income, resource is not working, then what's the calibration? What's the change? Saturn is typically very sustainability minded, like it has to work towards the future. But the thing about Saturn and Pisces is that money, income, property, assets, this is all the governance of what's called your second sign. It needs to fulfill your heart and your soul and your spirit. That's Pisces. And that's one of the things about having Pisces as a money sign, is that even if they give you $1 million to do it, if it doesn't feed your soul, it's going to create a clash in some way. So it doesn't mean that you can't make $1 million, whatever's important to you, whatever your values are, but it's just to always honor the things that really light you up and give you passion and really give you a sense of meaning and purpose in this world. That said, a lot of things going on in Gemini at the moment. And what is Gemini to you? Well, if I start with Aquarius and I count out 5 signs, I reach Gemini. We got the sun there, we got Venus there. Venus is a sign of home and family, so maybe there's a focus on children at the moment or something like that, however that's relevant to you. Mercury is going to get there next week. We're going to have a new moon there on the 6th of June, and then Jupiter is there. So Jupiter over the next 12 months is saying that it's a time for you to focus on the things that light you up, give you joy, replenish you, give you passion, really make you feel creative. Keep in mind that creativity does not equal art. Of course it can, but not always. Creativity is when we take the spirit of something that is inside of us and we put it into something. For some people, it is pregnancy and having a child. For some people, it is to take the best of you and to create something with it. Even if it's your work, it's your projects, maybe it is something that's creative and artistic or musical in a way. So how is this going to be relevant to you, Aquarius, over the next 12 months? Is it traditionally minded in the sense that you need to focus on creativity and art, and maybe you're like, no, I don't want to do art? Well, then how do you take the best of yourself and put it into something? Maybe you're burnt out. So Jupiter's trying to reignite the spark of who you are. Mind you, you do again have the Sun and Venus, and you will have Mercury and a new moon there next week. So to really plant your seeds as you go into June, to revitalize and to renew yourself, to give more time and investment in the things that actually nourish you, light you up, and give you joy. And for some people, it's about identity, really discovering and feeling and expressing exactly who you are. That's Gemini for you. It is air. Gemini is an air sign. Aquarius is an air sign. So it's giving you that air, that social connection, that movement, that creative energy and fire over the next month and even over the next 12 months. Finally, Pisces. Pisces, my last sign, but also my final mutable sign. So I was talking about this in the introduction, is that the second half of 2024 is going to be, at least in tone or theme, different than the first half of 2024. Because with Jupiter going into Gemini, it starts to activate the mutable signs. The mutable signs are the search for wisdom and knowledge and meaning and purpose in life. And you, as a Pisces, you have this role, or even Pisces rising, you have this role to really help to make people's world bigger. But through your heart and your compassion and your spirit, to even if you're artistic or musical, that's one of the ways, because you are Jupiter ruled. You are governed by Jupiter. Jupiter is your boss. With Jupiter in Pisces, I know it's in Gemini right now, but when it is typically at home in Pisces, it is to inspire the world beyond this world, for us to look beyond this world. And that's something that is a natural motivator for you, at least on paper. So it's bringing the energy of you now over to Gemini. Gemini is something called your fourth sign. So if I count out Pisces and I go Aries, Taurus, Gemini, I reach your fourth sign. And the fourth sign is the sign of home and family in the zodiac. It's roots and foundation. And it says for the next 12 months, home and family are where your energy is pointing towards. And I know that family is often a very complicated subject matter, but on a very neutral level, maybe you start a family, maybe you move, maybe you make a symbolic move, maybe you take your energy and you revitalize and re-nourish the base and foundation of your life. Maybe home is a complicated thing, and maybe Jupiter gives you the courage to leave behind a toxic situation, to find your sense of family that are more like you. Maybe Jupiter gives you a chance to find peace and forgiveness for something from the past. It's for you to see how this is relevant for you. But Jupiter will be there for a year. The Sun is there presently. It'll be there for a month. Venus is there presently. It'll be there for a couple more weeks. And then, you're going into a season, and certainly over the coming months, where it could be a move. It could be a change in the household. It could be something about parents, or something about a family, or family in general. And on some level, this is a time that is asking you, where is home and who is home? You still have Saturn in Pisces. It'll be in Pisces until the beginning of 2026. This continues to be a little bit more of a serious time. Life is maybe capital L life for you at the moment. And certainly if you are starting a family, moving, making a big move, or dealing with things around parents, that might be capital L life stuff. But Saturn talks about cycles of life and the growth and maturity, and even the milestones that come with the cycles of life. And so this could be a time when life is asking you to take on more duties and responsibilities. And maybe these duties and responsibilities also deal with home and family. Could be aging parents, if that's something that's relevant for you as well. But we're going to have an eclipse. I know I've said this before. We're going to have an eclipse in Pisces starting on September 17th. So it's just the second half of the year is really trying to get you to grow and mature more so than ever, and really to take whatever that next step up, that next milestone is in the personal story of your life. So There you go. So that is your look at each of the 12 signs for this week of May 27th through June 2nd, 2024. I appreciate you all. I know that it's a holiday, at least here in the United States. It's Memorial Day, and it's a very, very rainy Memorial Day here in New York City. But again, I appreciate you all. You can follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Spotify and YouTube. You can book a consultation with me. You can sign up for my newsletter that I put out first thing every Monday if you want to jump on the week. But I will see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.